Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Zaira Jordan is here presenting on accessible documents, how to make documents accessible in the five-part series. This is the fourth webinar. The next webinar will be in January for online courses, making online courses accessible. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Zaira. Please feel free to use the chat box if you have questions.
Thank you, Christy. Good morning and happy holidays. Today we have a really great session prepared so that you learn about the different elements when you're working on a document, on a Word document that is, and how to make them accessible and how does that translate into PDFs when you do PDFs. Go ahead and share the screen. And there you have it. Excellent. So let's get started. You probably work on Word documents almost every day. I know I do, and I know they're really popular. The Microsoft Office Word application is it's very popular as a word processor. And the Microsoft company has made it so that all their Microsoft Office suite applications, that would be Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all those applications have what I call an accessibility-minded interface. That is that it helps whoever is putting together the document to make it accessible. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through the different components of possible components of your documents. And I think it's comprehensive, the list. If you feel like there's something that you have put in a Word document that is not reflected in here, I would be happy to hear about it so that I can include it in my list. As you see here in the outline, I'll be talking and showing you a back and forth between Word documents and accessible PDFs. So Word documents, it's very likely that they're going to end up being accessible PDFs if you're going to send them through email or if you're going to post them online. So I'll explain in a minute how does taking the task or taking the measures when you're working on Word to make it accessible influences the end up product when you turn it into a PDF. It makes it accessible in a PDF, that is. So I'm going to talk about the different components, like I said, and those include the ones you see here, structure, and that includes headings and styles. Text elements, so when you put the text, how to structure it, how to organize it, how to code it or fix it so that it is accessible. What measures do you have to take so that color is discernible, so that any user, including users who might be colorblind, users who might be, elder, users who might be looking at a document they're standing outside in the mobiles and they're looking at a document, their light conditions are not the best. So color considerations help with all those use cases. Images, how to make images accessible, especially to screen readers, people who might not be visual users, people who might have visual impairments resort to screen readers, and images have to be taken into account for that. Lists, you probably put lists together that include bulleted or numbered lists, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about tables. You probably put together tables that, are included in your Word documents, what to do so that your tables are usable and are accessible to all kinds of users. And then links. When you put links in your document, what to do to make them accessible. So moving on, we start with headings. So as you see here, headings are essential. Headings are the way for you to guide your reader, the reader of your document, to understand what are the main topics and sub-main topics in your document. So if you structure your headings correctly, You're gonna have your reader be able to understand what your document is all about, what the content is all about, be able to browse through the content and maybe select sections of the document that are more relevant to what your reader is looking for. And also, you're going to help with screen reader users. Screen readers have features that allow for whoever is using them to listen to, for instance, a list of headers so that they know what the document is all about. That helps them navigate more easily. Um, and as you see here, headings must be used in a hierarchical manner. So if I take you, I have a demo document that I'll be using back and forth in this presentation. I actually have two documents. This document has been prepared by the Adobe people so that it's completely accessible, and it includes the elements that I just mentioned. As you see here, this document has a header, what you would say is a title of the document, and then it has a number of subheadings. And I don't know if can they see when I point with the pointer? Okay. Yep. So the title of the document, which would be the first heading. If you were to title your document, you would, write the title, select the title, and then make sure that you go to the Styles ribbon in the Home tab in your Word document, in your Word application, in the interface. In the top ribbon, there is a Styles. And as you see here, they're showing, all the styles are showing right now here. Yours might look a little different, but I think mostly all versions that are more recent from Word are going to show it somewhat similarly to what you see here.
And if you don't have an updated version of Word, you can call EIT hotline, and they can help you get a more updated version as well.
So you would get this. So there's always a lot of styles that are pre-selected and basically pre-programmed by the people of Microsoft, so that these styles are accessible. So if you select the title, in this case, this section of the document, you see here that heading 1 is selected. So that means that title, that heading, the first heading in the document is a heading 1. So you have to follow the hierarchy. You're going to have only one heading 1, ideally, so that you have only one title of the document. And then the subheadings are going to be heading 2, as you see here. If you were to create your document and you have subheadings, you should have one title with heading 1 and then subheadings that are second level headings as heading 2. And as you hear, there's a subheading here under text. There's different categories for text types, and that would be heading 3. For the most part, I think you're going to use at the most headings 1, 2, and 3 in your documents. You have a comment?
I have like a burning question about headings.
Go for it.
So obviously this blue is not the correct blue for our brand marketing. And we have a lot of people that would prefer to use red, Iowa State red, especially for the title of their document. So changing the color of these predefined headings, does that affect the accessibility at all?
I myself change the color, and I'm concerned sometimes when you pick the color. You want me to go through the change color? I believe is let me see if I can recall how to do it, because sometimes you do things in. No, this is not the way to go. I can't remember how to change the colors. Do you remember?
On the fly. If you just
no, but you don't change it on the fly. You have to change it in the style itself.
That's what the question is.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would
so you can't just highlight and then adjust the color.
You could, but the ideal is that the headings. Yeah, exactly, because that would make it consistent. I can't remember
what I just said.
You have to change the style. is what Zaira is saying. You see the style box that she has pulled up, and you can modify.
So if
She's
you
going to
want
walk
to
you through real quick.
if you want to modify the colors, and there's color schemes there that are predetermined by Microsoft, but right now we can, doing this on the fly. So
So if we
what I do is I usually select the dark red that
Okay.
seems similar to the one for our branding image.
So then when you exit out of this document, does it save that style for the next time that you come in?
No, you
Okay,
will
we
need
just
to, yeah, you will need to
Adjust for
change.
this particular
You will
document.
need to create a new style.
Okay, so we won't do that.
Yeah.
So you can modify the styles that way, and we can include written instructions on this when, someone said you can right-click on heading 1 too, and it will bring that up. Modify, there you go.
It's a lot easier that way. The
Thank
right
you.
click helps.
So I can include written instructions for that too when we send out a recording of the video for people that want to know how that works as well. Sorry, go ahead. I was
You're
always
fine.
wondering if it affected at all.
Okay, so yeah, I do it myself, just so you know. So you see here a heading 4 for the bulleted list, and so on and so forth. So as you see here, this document is well structured. When you look at it right away, you can tell about the content. The color in the headings and the level of the headings helps you as a reader determine what's level 1, what's the most important, what's the title, and then what are the different sections and different subheadings and content in the document. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint.
We have a couple comments.
Okay,
Taylor
go ahead.
says under more colors, you can also enter the correct hex value or RGB color from the
Okay.
ISU palette. And Cindy says you can also set the color palette to ISU, and then your headings would be updated to that color theme. I'm guessing there's some sort of import style that's
Yeah.
available for that.
There must be. I have never used it myself.
Okay,
I
so-
do an approximate like I showed you.
Yeah. So Cindy, maybe we can talk about how that color palette works, because I know our color palette is not built into Word, so we must be importing the styles from
Yeah,
somewhere.
Definitely.
So, okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Thank you so much. And that's knowledge that I myself maybe don't have, and I always learn from the people that I'm interacting with. So Thank you
Cindy
so
says
much.
yes, it's an imported style, so she can help me out.
Excellent. Okay, so next we talk about text in general, and text basically refers to the paragraphs you basically use as descriptions for your headings. So try to avoid as much as you can any hard return. That would be like using the return in your keyboard, or using blank spaces. Use indentations with the tab rather, so that you have only blank spaces that are pre-programmed, and no blank spaces that are space, 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 space. So as it says here, indentations, and paragraph spacing should be used in Word document for structure. This prevents the screen reader users from reading blank spaces. That's why I'm saying don't use space, 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 because that might be what the screen reader ends up saying to the screen reader user when you have a Word document that is turned into a PDF like you see here. So in the source document that I'm presenting to you, there should only be returns where there's, a next text. For instance, in this case, you go from the heading to the paragraph, and the paragraph has been selected or has been, I guess, coded or styled as a normal, as you see here. So all text that is not a heading should be a normal. Other than, there might be other use cases where you have a subtitle or things like that. In any case, what you should do always with text is style it with the pre-programmed styles.
Which Word automatically does for you, right? Like if
Exactly.
you were to put a heading in and hit enter, it should automatically switch you back to the normal paragraph style. Okay.
Yeah,
So that's not
definitely.
something you'll have to physically change,
Yeah.
hopefully. Just something to double check.
Definitely. So I think that it's about That's all about text, Sarah. Do you have any other maybe questions or comments?
Not yet.
Okay, so it's important again to use tab and you not use spaces and use styles, just like with headings.
Basically, try to use the things that are provided either on your keyboard or via Word itself,
Exactly.
instead of finding some sort of workaround.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my recommendation, or I guess the not the other way of doing this might be for you to use, like, try to manipulate the font and try to change the color on your own rather than resorting to a style that is pre-programmed, and that's basically not recommended because that's not going to make your document accessible. It's actually going to make it inaccessible.
Right. Even if you were to modify the style the correct way, just adjusting the font or color could be an ADA compliance issue.
Yeah.
Not every font is as readable as every other font. Size of the font matters. Color contrast, of course. So every little bit of that is part of making sure our document is accessible.
It's readable, and it's also even aesthetically pleasing because the styles that Microsoft has put together have the considerations about having the fonts not only be readable but be kind of like, they look good with each other. Okay, so let's move on to color. You have to take decisions, and we were just talking about color, right? So sometimes you're just making decisions about what colors to use in whatever types of documents you're presenting. It's important for you to take into account the contrast of the color scheme that you're using. And as you see here, it's always best to address it in the original document, and you can resort to the color contrast checker that WebAIM provides. You have a screenshot here of the tool. I don't know, can we go into a demo right now?
Yeah, while you're doing that, Taylor wants to know if the ISU fonts, Universe Berkeley, are what they should use. If they can modify the headings to use our university fonts. Arial Times New Roman, those are fallback fonts, Taylor, so those wouldn't technically be university fonts. So Arial and Times New Roman are acceptable if you don't have Cindy sort of answered the question. If you don't have Universe or Berkeley, fall back to the Arial or Times New Roman. But if you have Universe or Berkeley or both, yes, you can most definitely use those. Of course, just make sure to modify the style appropriately. And it looks like, I'm not sure, Cindy, can you answer this question? Is the university fonts part of the style import for the headings that is included in that color change that you talked about just a minute ago? She's going to respond real quick.
And if it's not already available through the university website where you get all the information from our branding, if it's not already available, you can create a new style with all, with the font and the color.
Yeah, right. Cindy's going to check and let us know in a little bit.
Excellent.
So go ahead with your demo.
Okay, so
I'm sorry. I got to remind everybody, if you're having trouble viewing the view portion of the screen, you can make your screen bigger. Up at the top right-hand corner, there are 4 little arrows pointed in different directions. If you click that, it will bring just the presentation window up to cover your whole screen, so it can make it a little bit bigger if needed. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. So I don't know if you know them off the top of your mind, the colors. You probably do.
I do.
So the colors in our branding scheme.
We use, for websites, we use CC and then 4 zeros.
CZ 44.
No, 4 zeros.
0000.
And then do you want the yellow? Okay, it's F1B.
F1B.
E. 4. 8. Okay. 8, I think.
8?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So, where can they get those codes from?
You can get that from the visual identity guide on my extension that Advancement has put together. It has all of the correct um, code values, hex values, which is what the pound and the numbers that I gave Zaira just now are, or RGB and CMYK colors as well. So, and Pantone colors, I believe, are on there too. So they have all different versions for whatever program you're using for the appropriate color schemes.
So I actually, I think you gave me the colors on purpose, and I actually like to do this with the gold and the cardinal, because so that you can see that you shouldn't be using gold and the cardinal one on top of the other, because it's a fail. It's a fail for normal text, so it doesn't pass the test of contrast. It's a pass for large text, so you might be able to use it for a poster and things like that, maybe even for a title in PowerPoint, but just so that refrain from using the colors, the our colors, cardinal over gold like this. So the option would be to use white maybe.
Yeah. You cannot use yellow and white in any fashion, though. I'm just going to point that out.
Okay.
Either large or normal text, it fails on both accounts. So you'll notice probably on our websites, especially, we use gold as an accent color. It's underneath the red top bar of our websites, but there's no text on it. We don't ever put text on yellow or vice versa. So that is why we use gold as an accent color.
Okay. So as you see here, the red over white passes for both. I have talked about this before. You probably, I mean, if you are new to the trainings, you don't know what WCAG is. It's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And those are the guidelines that we abide by at the university, and mostly the government. The federal government has pointed to WCAG as the way to go in terms of compliance. Even 508 requirements seem to coincide with WCAG.
And just the AA standard, right? Not the AAA?
You don't have to, you don't have to even look at WCAG AAA here. So if it's a fail here, it's no big deal. It would be ideal, that it's a pass too, but
that would be perfection.
Yeah. Accessibility tends to not be a number and never be 100%. Accessibility is a process. So you keep working at it and working at it until maybe someday you'll get to perfection. But technology changes all the time. The content that we're putting together changes all the time. So it's a work in progress always. So I guess that's it about color. One another thing that I would like to call your attention to, when your readers are looking at your documents, if you only signal some sort of information that you want to signal through color, a reader that is colorblind might not perceive it. So one another requirement is that not only call attention to things through color. For instance, when you resort to color differences in your headings here, you can tell that there's a change in the size of the font as well. So that's one another way that something that it's trying, the document is trying to communicate to you that a heading is more important. Is a heading, it's a guidance to what is contained within that section. So it's highlighted both through color and the size of the font.
I'm glad you brought that up because can we talk just for a minute?
Yeah, definitely.
We've already talked about why the styles already predefined, the headings already predefined are so important to use because that is what our screen reader users, that's what their screen reader picks up and tells them is the most important. Can you talk about text that is bold or italicized?
Okay. Bold or italicized text in the document itself?
Yeah, we have, I think just from years and years of using Word, it seems like second nature sometimes just to bold or italicize something that you want to draw not a big emphasis to, but just a little bit of an emphasis to. So, can you talk about the accessibility ramifications of doing that, and if there's any other recommendation that you have?
You'll try to highlight some sort of content by bolding it or italicizing. I try to refrain from doing that. I resort to if I'm in the body of the document in a paragraph. Let's use the document as a reference.
I guess we should also count underlining in on this discussion.
Yeah. So what I do, and this might not be perceivable by all screen readers. So the screen reader is not going to tell the user, the non-visual user, this section is italicized or this section is bolded. This is for users who might not perceive things, who might perceive things visually rather, but might have some sort of visual impairment like color blindness. So what I do instead, let's say that I want to highlight headings here. So what I do is I underline it. I tend to underline things rather than, and that's my own personal choice that to guide the user, so that to signal, if I were to just say, okay, I want to call attention to this word here, so I make it red. So if I make it red, I underline it as well. It's not going to make a difference to a screen reader user, I don't think. Have you learned differently? Maybe I need to be corrected in that sense.
Not specifically on Word documents. On web, we try not to highlight and underline anything that is not a link.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if the same applies for.
Sense.
There is a strong and emphasis heading or style predefined, right? So if you did really want to bold or italicize something, as long as you use the style that's predefined as opposed to the
that's
bolder.
the way to go. Okay. That is the way to go. I mean, if I were to do that, the best way to do that is to highlight it through emphasis here.
Okay. Thank you.
Good deal. So I would have to go back and say this is normal. Okay. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Good. Great questions. And if you have any comments or questions,
use the chat box, everybody, if you have questions or comments.
Okay, moving on, we go to lists. So you probably have come across something that you want to make a list about. So a correctly formatted list, as you see here, makes it easier for the reader to perceive it if there's a number of statements or words that you want him or her to look at, to read through. So bulleted and numbered lists, those are the options. When you use the word predetermined style for doing that, it makes it a lot more accessible. And when we talk about Word, and probably I haven't mentioned this, or maybe I did, I can't remember. When you talk about Word, and I think I did, you might end up turning that Word document into a PDF. So whatever you do in Word, it's going to reflect in your end up product in PDF. So it's the same case with the lists.
Accessible documents, especially when you're exporting to Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat, it really is very dependent on how you originally create the document. You want to take all of the right steps when you're originally creating. You can still remediate in Adobe Acrobat if you didn't do any of that. It's just very time intensive.
Oh yes, definitely.
And confusing.
It's that itself, that skill set is a work in process for myself. I mean, every time I have to remediate a PDF that is not accessible, it takes a long time. Okay, so we have here the information about lists. When you have elements or items that don't need to be prioritized, you're going to use a list that is bulleted rather. And then, for instance, you may want to list a number of links, and we're going to talk about links later on. A subset of detailed information, other information that doesn't need the hierarchy of the numbered lists. So in the document, in the source document that I've been showing, you have both examples: a bulleted list with items that don't need prioritization, And then a numbered list that what it says is like a list of countries I want to visit. United Kingdom, Italy, so they're in order of preference. So that calls for a numbered list, which you do in the predetermined functionality that Word offers, rather than writing your own numbers or inserting your own types of bullets. And I even think that when you're working on Word, if you start doing that, Word itself will defer or will go back to their predetermined styles automatically as you go through the list.
So basically, the lesson of the day is use the predefined stuff.
Which is a lot easier
Make
because
it easier on yourself.
yeah, it's a matter of clicking a button or even selecting and clicking. So numbered lists, you saw that already, and then we move on to tables. Tables present unique challenges for screen readers because they tend to be more complex. I myself have experienced with people who, I mean, persons who I know that are blind, and they tell me, oh my God, this table creates so much stress for me. I can't navigate through it. I can't understand what it says. So, I have a lot of empathy for when I create my own tables. I try for them to be as simple as possible so that they can navigate through them easily. So, as you see here, when creating a table in Word, be mindful of the order. There's a typo here. I'm sorry. Of the order, and avoid merging cells. Merging cells, it's terrible for screen readers. Provide clear headings. If necessary, if the table turns into something a little bit more complicated, you can provide an alternate text, and I'll show you how to do that. And then there's one another step that you should take to make the table accessible. Repeat header rows in the table layout tab, and I'll show you how to do that. So if we go to the source document, we have a table here that has been pre-done. So if you select the table, these two tabs become accessible automatically in Word. Those are the tabs for designing and layout the table itself. You should have a header row always available or selected. And I think that's the default. When you insert a table in Word, you're going to have a header row selected. Unless you unselect it, then it would not be accessible. It would be an inaccessible table. So you should have this selected. And then another measure right away that you can take in your table is to go to the Layout tab and select Repeat Header Rows, which would cause for the table to, if it was broken into pieces or broken between two pages, for instance, the header rows would repeat, but it also seems to be in agreement with screen readers. It helps screen readers read the headings.
I have a question about tables. The one in this example is obviously very similar or very simple, and there are obviously lots of situations where we use super simple tables, but on the flip side, there are lots of situations where we are using extremely complex information in tables. I actually just looked at one the other day, and it was about growing seasons for different vegetables, and it had the vegetables listed on the first column, and then across the first row was the different months of the year, and they had a little color bar that like kind of went through each of those months to show the growing season for each vegetable. So, I mean, we have a lot of instances like that where our tables are extremely complex. So, what are your recommendations? Obviously, those complex tables are going to be way harder to make accessible. What are your recommendations? Do we try to make the table as simple as we can, still providing the best information? Do we just include a nice summary of the information that's presented? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Those are the two measures or the two, I guess, decision-making processes that I go through And I think everybody should try to establish a balance between what you want to communicate and your user needs. So if things when I'm trying to decide how to design a document and how to put together content, if I definitely need to communicate it in a way that is not going to be accessible, how can I make it so that the user who might not be able to see it and listens to it through a screen reader, how can I communicate to him or her the same information as much as possible? I mean, there's limits to what we can accomplish, but as long as you keep it in mind and be empathetic and think about the different needs that users may have, I think you're gonna end up doing at least some sort of a task where you're gonna deliver the information you need to deliver. So in the case of tables, you can insert a caption explaining what it is. You can, I guess, you can also go to alternate text and include an alternate text.
How in
Do
depth
either
would you
or.
get with the caption or the alternate text for the table? How in depth of the information provided? I mean, we have some that are several pages long, so obviously we cannot write all of that. So do you just kind of explain the information that's being provided in the table? Like this is a
Yeah.
table providing growing seasons for each vegetable, or do you
Yeah.
like corn can be planted from this month to this month? I mean, how in detail do you get in those descriptions?
When you offer information as critical as, for instance, there's a reader in your content that wants to know when to grow things, and if you show the table and you're not able to provide the detailed information, maybe the decision making includes providing for an accommodation. That would be, if you need more information and you're listening to the alternate text, write to us, send us an email. I don't know. There's many different things that you can do to accomplish what you need to accomplish and communicate what you need to communicate to all your users. It all depends on context as well.
So, when possible, simplify the table so that the screen reader can actually read it.
Definitely.
But when not possible, at least provide the caption or alternative text and include some sort of contact information for reasonable accommodation. Okay,
That'd be the ideal.
thank you.
And I also have a demo document with errors. And as you see here, there's a table here that it's a little bit more complex. So depending on what you want to communicate, maybe in this table you can write a description and go through all the numbers. Again, it's a decision-making process that needs to be taken in context. What is it that you ultimately want your reader to know? And if it's a non-visual reader, what he should leave or she should leave with in terms of
What's
knowledge.
most important
Yeah.
with the table. Okay.
So again, to recap, provide headings, provide an alternate text if it's needed, or captions, and select repeat header rows in the table layout tab. Then we move on to images, and images, again, it's kind of like the same thing. You have to make decisions that are contextual. If you're using an image that is only for decorative purposes, you don't have to create an alternate text, and I'll show you in a minute how to do that. When you present an image in a document, you're trying to convey some sort of information to your visual reader. You should try to provide the same information to your non-visual reader, and you do that through an alternate text. So let me show you. You have a question or a comment?
I was just going to point out that the key here is that it is when you include an image, either in a document or online, it needs to be with purpose, as opposed to just for fun or to make it more eye appealing. We want to make sure that the images that we're including are serve a purpose for the content or the extent of what we're trying to get across to our user.
So in the source document that I'm using as an example, if I go to the image and select it and right click on it, I can go to the last item in the menu, format picture, and then menu is going to show on the right hand of your Word document. And then you click on the third from the left item, which is one of the items for formatting is layout and properties, as you see here. And then alternate text is over there. So you can write your small description, alternate text in the title. Sometimes when it's more involved and it's more in detail, what I do is I rather do a small title and then go into the description in detail. And as you see here in this title, in this alternate text, it says color wheel showing appropriate. And there's a description that, it's contextual. It's providing information about what is that color wheel trying to communicate.
I just wanna
you wanna
see
see it?
exactly
Yeah,
what it's saying, so
sorry.
I'm gonna post it so we can actually read it.
So, and there's even a typo here that I should correct. Color wheel showing appropriate foreground text colors, black or white, against a variety of background colors.
Okay.
And then there's another image here. I think. There's I was just checking this image has a caption. So you normally do either or, because otherwise your screen reader user is going to listen to the same information twice.
Can you show how to add a caption real quick?
If I can recall it. I think, okay, it's one another item menu.
Right click on the image and go to caption. Okay, great. Easy enough.
There are things that, people ask me to do things and I do them automatically, and it's like a process that I don't register. And when they ask me to do them, I'm like, how do you do that? Okay, so here's the illustration for what I just did. Provide descriptions that are appropriate and succinct. Contextual, again, decision making in terms of what you want to convey. It's contextual. It depends on what you're putting together and what you're trying to communicate to the reader. My recommendation to you, be empathetic. Think about what the user needs and what the users that might end up using your document might need. And you have as an extension has this mission to try to convey your information to all types of users. So the mission should be to reach users that have multiple different needs. So if a user was using a screen reader, or if you were using a screen reader, what information would you need to understand the purpose or value of the image? That's the question that I guide people to. So no need to include a description if the image is decorative, like I just said. Depending on the application you may be using, the process may differ, but in Word, it's like this with the format picture menu.
Would you encourage or discourage the use of purely decorative images?
Sometimes you can't do away with them, but minimize it. Minimize the use of decorative images as much as possible. Okay, so the next topic would be links, and links refers, as you see here, to the links that you use for linking to another website or maybe another point in your document. In Word, you can select the text, and then by right-clicking on it, you can create a link. In this case, because it's a link already, it says to edit. So your links should be basically, the words that you use to link to should explain what it links to. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very
like no
well.
click here or read more, because it's
Exactly.
not explanatory for what they're going to get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In this case, I am pointing towards something related to screen reader users. So As you see here, screen reader users frequently resort, to lists of links when they navigate through a page. There's a shortcut in a screen reader that allows for them to listen to all the links in the page. And if it says click here, click here, click here, click here, they're not going to know the difference between the different links in your page. And as you see here in the study, and that's what I'm linking to the study, in a study with screen reader users that some researchers conducted not long ago, they, after observing them interacting with the screen readers, they recommended that links are descriptive, that you start links with relevant keywords, and starting links with different words that are relevant to the linked content. So as you see here, the citation for that study, it's really interesting. I like to, when I create my recommendations, I try to abide by the things that the users themselves are gonna want. So this is a good way of determining what to do. Listening to what screen reader users, people who depend on a screen reader, do when they come to the content, so that their needs are served. In the case of the source document that I've been showing, you have a link here to Adobe corporate accessibility page. And that's just an example that the document has provided. But I guess, you get it. If you're gonna link to some content, make your the source text, the source for your link, description of what you're linking to. Any comments?
Now that we have set up the Word document correctly, can you show everyone how to use the accessibility checker in Microsoft Word?
Oh, definitely. I almost forgot about that. Okay, so we have this first.
And we can talk just a little bit about Microsoft Word is part of the Microsoft Office product, which also has PowerPoint and Excel and so forth that we all use quite a bit. So I would assume that all of these steps are fairly similar throughout those products.
Yes, definitely. In terms of PowerPoint, I even have a presentation and a video in my website, and I'll show you what my website is, about what to take into account with PowerPoint too, because PowerPoint might have another consideration. You might use it in a classroom or in a setup where there's a lot of light, so you want to consider that as well. I'll guide you to it through in a minute, but the accessibility checker, I almost forgot about it, but we did so well in this document that we don't even need the accessibility checker. So how to identify any issues that you might have until you after you've done all this work with all your documents and you have it ready to go and you feel like it's great. Okay, so you go to File and then you see this little button here, Check for Issues. And they're seeing this,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So you select Check for Issues, and then the second element, the second menu item is Check Accessibility. You click on that, and a report will tell you if there's any problems in your document. In this document, because it's so perfect and it was already done, there's no accessibility issues. But let's go and use the other source document that I have, which has errors, accessibility errors, and if I run the checker, it should show a few different things that need to be taken into account. The checker might not show everything, so your knowledge of the different elements that I just provided, for instance, it's not pointing towards this it should be a bulleted list, but those are things that are manual checks, to put it somehow.
Or color contrast would be a manual visual check.
So in this case, we have a missing alternate text, or we have 3 missing alternate text, and it's going to point to those.
So as you click on those errors, it takes you to the exact one. And if you guys can see the image that it's actually on right now.
Oh,
sorry, the image that you can see, it's actually
This one.
selected the image that has the issue
And
for
then you
you.
go and remediate it, and then it should be fine. So let's say that I go to this image and include an alternate text. And I can't even perceive what that image is. That
I
shouldn't
think
be
it's the
used.
sunset image. Sunset? With
Okay,
the
let's
wine
do
glass,
sunset.
or I'm not sure. A raindrop or something.
And as you see here, there's in the description, there's a link description that shouldn't be used, because that's gonna be, imagine how annoying it would be for you to listen to C:/user/Rob, and that's what the screen reader user would hear. So we do away with that, and then we remediate. You see, they
It
keep
just automatically comes off.
disappearing. Yeah.
Great.
So this is a doggy. And it should be more. I mean, I don't know the context of these images right now, so I'm just trying to make do. There's a caption here, so maybe we shouldn't necessarily need an alternate text, but let's just insert it in this case.
So this would be another case of a manual, like best judgment
Yeah.
for some of these.
Exactly. And the table, again, you go to the table and you go to table properties and go to alternate text and whatever description, table description.
I don't, if you guys can see also on the accessibility checker as she's pulling up these issues, at the bottom underneath that white box there, it actually gives you additional information. Why you should be fixing it, like what the issue
Yeah.
specifically is and how you can fix it.
So that's one of the wonderful things that Microsoft Word and the people at Microsoft have done, that they give you recommendations and even provide information in detail. So even why fix the error, it's listed in the document. So that results, if you were going to turn this document, let's say you're finished, there's no accessibility issues, and even if there's some that are listed by the checker that might not be real, because checkers sometimes bring up things that are not accessibility issues. So that's a judgment call that you have to make with the knowledge that you have. If there's something that it's being pointed in the checker that you know is not an issue, you have to ignore it. And then you want to turn it into a PDF, you go to File, Save As, and then in this case, I'm just going to put it in the desktop, I guess. And then you change the type of document to PDF, and you save it. And that would create a PDF that it's what we call tagged, so that the screen reader user can use it effectively. I don't want to get into more details in terms of PDFs, because that's yet another session altogether. But and there's no accessibility checker available here. You need an accessibility checker only available in Adobe Acrobat Pro, and many of you might not have that. So.
But the point is if you design it correctly,
Yeah.
in Word, I think there are a few things that you have to manually do in Adobe Acrobat no matter what, and that would be setting the language and the
Yes.
title
Yes.
of your document. But if you have designed it correctly from the beginning,
Yeah.
theoretically, you
Yeah.
should be good. And Adobe Acrobat is the same as Microsoft Word. It will bring up certain errors, and it will tell you that you have to manually check them.
Exactly.
So no matter how good you did, you're going to have something that says, hey, you probably should manually check this.
Yeah.
So again, it's just understanding the process and why you're doing what you're doing that's most important.
Yeah, and being empathetic always. I mean, have that mindset and think about users. For me, it's about a lived experience. You know, I've had very many interactions with persons with disabilities, visual disabilities, auditive disabilities, and you know, because I don't live it myself. Maybe I live it a little bit, because like as I get older, you know, I can't see as well as I used to. So that's yet another consideration, you know. So it brings empathy in your mind. Maybe you can even use, so that you know how it happens, how those people use screen readers. There's in Acrobat Reader, there is a read out loud option that starts reading the document. I don't know if you can hear it at all. but you can resort to that if you want to. And I guess that's all that I have, other than I said that I was going to take you to the website, the digital access website at Iowa State, where there is a presentation on PowerPoint, and there's a lot of resources that I have curated so that you have those readily available to you. Is there any questions that are being?
If anyone has any questions, go ahead and type those in the chat box so we can spend the last 5 minutes answering those. Cindy did get back to us about the styles and fonts,
Uh-huh.
At which I was guessing this was the case, but those university fonts have a cost associated with them, so
Yeah.
they're not included in those predefined styles that would change the colors to Iowa State branding palette.
But I think the image branding, and what they say, it's that if you don't have them available, you can resort to Arial.
Yeah, Arial and Times New Roman. So, but they don't include the university fonts
Yeah.
in the styles that you can import. So, because um, not everyone has access to those. Mary Kay would like you to put your final slide back up real quick
Oh,
so
okay. Yeah.
she can see the information.
I would recommend, and I guess I'm going to promote this more and more. I have Twitter. I didn't used to tweet before becoming the web accessibility coordinator, but it's so useful because I come across a lot of articles that are very great. And what I do is I tweet them so that people can learn more about
Did you say twit?
tweet. Sorry, it's my Spanish coming out.
That was so funny.
So yeah, you can if you follow me, that might help. What I do is, and also maybe this is one other thing that you can do. I do it because it's my job. So, but you can create a Google alert of any term that you're interested on. In my case, it's accessibility, and Google sends me an email every day with articles about accessibility. So those are the source articles that I sometimes tweet. Okay, and then go ahead.
I know we talked about this a little bit before we started the webinar, and this was very specific to Microsoft Office products. But we do have some people who are using like Adobe Creative Suite products, Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, and so on. Can you talk a little bit about, obviously Microsoft Office has really cornered the market right now for accessibility and being very compatible and set up that way. But can you talk about the differences in the software?
Oh my God. InDesign has a lot of limitations. So the platform itself does not provide as much functionality that helps you as an editor or a creator or a designer to put together content that is accessible. So there's a lot that you need to do to be able to remediate the content that you create with InDesign. And Christy and her team are working on protocols that are going to help you as a designer, shorten that process or make it so that it's a lot more available or accessible, I should say.
Yeah, I can definitely say that Microsoft Office as a whole is very similar across the board, no matter which one of their programs that you're using. And when it comes to the Adobe Creative Suite, that is not the case at all. Every single software is completely different from the others. So yeah, it can be challenging. But we are working on some information for that. So if you are someone that is using those products and want to learn more about it, you can contact us and the EIT or just my email, kelmore@iastate.edu, and we can kind of get you to the right person to help you with that information. So I know you want to talk about your website, so go ahead.
Oh, yeah, we're out of time, but you can go to digitalaccess.iastate.edu and search for whatever terms. I hope that I have enough material, but if you come across some sort of a question, you can just email me here. I mentioned the PowerPoint, so I'm just going to leave you with that. If you search PowerPoint here, You're gonna come across the video presentation that I have already recorded, and again, there's a link to checking your document like I just did.
Yeah, there's some awesome resources. I frequently use several of the
Good.
presentations. There's one that shows why video